Hello, I am Mamadou Mbodj and welcome to the Viewpoint. Today we are guests of the American ambassador to the Gambia. We are right here in Fajara, this beautiful home. Once you walk in, the leafy site is quite a sight to behold, really fantastic. So now we're in the living room overlooking the Atlantic. But I'm not here to interview her. That's for next time. I'm here to interview a special guest, a career member of the U.S.'s Senior Foreign Service. His portfolio, according to the website and the Department of State's website, covers West Africa and the Sahel. He has at one point served as Director for Analysis of Africa in the State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, and has also served as Deputy Chief of Mission and Charge d'Affaires in Kathmandu, Nepal, and Lilongwe in Malawi. Not only that, he has won, he's been a 5-time recipient of the Department of State's Superior Honor Award. He started his current position in October 2020 as the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Bureau of African Affairs of the U.S. State Department. Welcome, Mr. Michael Gonzalez, to the Viewpoint.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today.
Absolutely. Well, I assume is this your first time? Actually, before we came on air, you said that this was your first visit to this country. We often ask these questions. Your first impressions?
So I've been wanting to come to the Gambia since I took the assignment in October of 2020 because it's such a momentous time in the history of this nation. And the people have spoken. More recently, with the elections, the people have endorsed the mandate of President Barrow, but they want reform. And I fundamentally believe that they want deep institutional reforms. There's the mantra of never again, and I think the people really want that, but that will only be best assured through fundamental institutions that are strong, not just people or moments in time. And so it's an exciting time to be here. What I also find is I thought they talked about this as the smiling coast because the people smile, and they do. But what I find is since being here, I'm smiling all the time. Just the environment, the people, the energy is so exciting that it's an honor to be here.
Yes, so the smile is infectious.
Indeed, I can see why.
You are catching on. Fantastic. Any annoying bits?
I'm sorry?
Any annoying bits? Any annoying habits?
Not that I've yet noticed. I've been here only 2 days.
Absolutely. So, what's the purpose of your visit? If I may ask you that, yes.
Again, there's nothing like being here myself, seeing tangibly the dynamism, engaging with leaders from civil society to the government, to really understand what is it that the people of the Gambia demand. And how can the United States play a role in contributing to the bright future that we can all see and that we want to achieve? And so I had a wonderful time yesterday morning meeting with His Excellency the President. Also met with the Solicitor General to discuss their vision for constitutional reform, for political reforms, transitional justice, and human trafficking. And lots of areas where the United States can support those processes.
Absolutely. When Biden's welcoming remarks of the 34th AU session, it generated so much excitement that perhaps the Biden administration really would be more beneficial, more favorable to our aspirations right now. So one is sort of curious to know, has there been a shift with the Biden administration? There was a rumor of a review in the Africa strategy. What has been the shift, if any?
Well, I think if you look at U.S. policy towards Africa over time, it generally is pretty stable and it doesn't drastically change from Democratic to Republican administration or from president to president. Although the emphasis can and does, and I'm glad you noted President Biden's address to the African Union. I think that happened within his first 10 days in office. Of all the things the President of the United States was focused on in his first 2 weeks, he was focused on the African Union. And I think that reflects a real deep and sustained commitment by this administration to partnerships and to supporting African institutions. The United States, I believe, and the President believes, has an important role to play as partner and friend of Africa, but it's not for the United States to lead. It's for African people, governments, and institutions to lead. The United States can support.
But what can change? Because now everybody is commonplace to say things like the U.S. is losing ground, be it to China or to anybody else. These rivals, the U.S. is losing ground. So one wonders perhaps there has been new impetus to catch up and change, a decisive, perhaps a quantifiable change in the relationship between the U.S. and Africa.
Sure. I would argue that there are fundamental differences in the value proposition that is available. And the value proposition that the United States presents is one of a free and open rules-based order. That means things like fighting corruption. It means things like transparency in governance and in procurements. It means things like a predictable, reliable, and consistent business enabling environment so that the rules are clear, that everyone can compete equally within that rules-based arena, and that the people who the government is governing for, by and through, actually have full visibility and say in the options of what is presented to them, whether it's a procurement for a road or it's a trade deal. I think the issue is far too often we find the notorious smoky back rooms where deals are made. And that may work to perpetuate elites, but it does not succeed in serving the interests of a people, of a nation, or equity. And that's what we are pushing for, that's the United States value proposition. And it's going to take time, and it's going to take political will and lots of partnerships with not only governments, like I say, but civil society, with the media.
Absolutely. But here, when you mention the rules-based sort of relationship, as it were, fine, but a criticism often put to America is that you actually work sometimes with people like that who would not follow the rule of law, who would do really awful things, but because of your interest, then therefore you ignore the rules. So this sort of double standards then makes it difficult for the rest of the world to take it seriously at that level, for you to drive any value-based, as it were, development. Doesn't it compromise you? Doesn't it morally compromise you? Perhaps dilute the effect that you could have had?
I think there are ample examples that would challenge that. Fundamentally, in order to get things done, one has to understand who has the power to influence. And one can enforce or try to, force their way towards a solution, but that's not going to be sustainable, and it is not going to work in the longer term. So fundamentally, I think we need, and we are committed to working on the environment for that rules-based order, recognizing that different environments and different circumstances require different tactics. And sometimes that does mean, in order to get the fundamental reforms through that allow for a free and fair election, you have to work with the dictator. And I think your country is a wonderful example of working, how the people worked within a system led by a horrendous dictator of Yahya Jammeh in order to change incrementally over time, and resulting in 2016 with the transformation of this country. And the same applies in international relations as well.
That's it. Over the years, we've seen many cooperation initiatives, be it AGOA or the Millennium Challenge Corporation and all the rest of it. Can we go perhaps one after the other, just a few of them, obviously not all, particularly AGOA. It's been extended, isn't it? Since it was introduced by Clinton, I think in 2000. Would you call it a success? Has it been a success?
It's an interesting question. I think it has been useful. But let's look at what AGOA is. So it's a trade preference program that allows duty-free access into the United States for about 6,500 or so tariff line items of products from African countries that other countries would be subject to paying a tariff on. So it makes African products coming into the United States cheaper to purchase. I would argue that the notion behind it was to provide that advantage to African producers, to make African producers' awareness among American consumers greater, to spur the demand for those products. But ultimately, giving a preference to one group into perpetuity is not going to be sustainable. I would argue that the real value proposition of AGOA is to create that breathing space for African producers to increase the demand for their products so that they become more efficient, so that while we also work with African governments about regulations in the business enabling environment, new producers can come in, and that the trade preference can, in the short term, provide breathing space while the broader economy grows. And so I would argue that the trade preference has benefited, but we haven't seen the fundamental reforms on the business enabling environments in African countries that has brought in a lot more investors or spurred the trade that we would like to see. And so now we're working on not only the trade preference, but really utilization of it and programs largely through USAID in order to address the fundamentals of the business enabling environment so that we can get both results.
That's it, because there's been this suggestion that when it comes to American businesses, somehow the opportunities presented American businesses really have not been taking that up with Africa. So seeing that as sort of one of the shortcomings, but it seems to me that what you're saying is because that we are not keeping our end of the bargain as well as we should. That is why we've not been able to trigger that kind of interest. Is that your argument?
I think that's right. And you know, the World Bank used to produce a doing business report that provided a whole series of indicators about the ease of doing business in various components in countries around the world. And so it would look like, how many days does it take to get a business license? How much does the court system uphold the sanctity of contracts? How easy is it to procure land? And those countries that had those metrics more favorable saw the benefits of attracting business. I would argue when you look at many African countries, they're in the lower part of that doing business indicator set. And so that's where the improvements need to take place. Because right now, to be candid, American companies don't know a lot about Africa. That's why you see very few of them here on the continent. And when they do come to look, they look at those things of, will my contract be honored? Can I get foreign exchange to expatriate my profits? And if the answers are no, they're not going to put their money at risk. Now, we do see that companies from other parts of the world have a lower risk tolerance threshold. What I would advocate for is working between the United States and international partners and African governments to improve the ease of doing business. That will attract the businesses, not only from America, but from Paraguay and Greece and from France and from China and all the different places. And that will be what creates jobs for African citizens, that will pay revenues into the government coffers to allow governments to provide for health and education. Ultimately, it's not going to be governments, and it's not going to be international aid that develops an economy. It's going to be the private sector. So let's make it easier for them.
Yes, but how deep is that commitment? There is a suggestion, there's an argument made that right now the US would be really more focused on other rivalries, be it with China, be it with Russia. There are other concerns right now than with Africa. They will point out that in the past decade or so, Africa-US trade has fallen by 50%. When it comes to foreign direct investment into Africa, we receive the least of all the regions. So one wonders, where is the commitment? Where would the spending? Are they really serious? Where are we? Where would you position us in your list of priorities?
It's an interesting question, and I'd actually like to pose it back to you. But first, let me answer a bit. You know, unlike China, the United States doesn't control our private sector and doesn't say, you will invest here. Unlike plenty of places around the world, we actually have laws against corruption. We have the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, so that if an American business engages in bribery or corruption with a foreign government official, that American business and their leaders will be punished, will be prosecuted, and serve jail time. Because again, going back to that rules-based order, that's what we're trying to perpetuate. I got no problem with international companies competing with us. It makes us stronger. It makes us nimble. And you know, we have plenty of competitors. Let's start with England, France, Germany. And we have great relationships with them. So it's not that we're opposed to the competition. It's the competition that manipulates and takes advantage of beneficiaries, that manipulates and engages in corruption, and that has a malign effect. If we look at the investment that happens, take so many of a number of, for example, Chinese nominally Belt and Road investments across the continent. They're putting massive infrastructure. What's the quality of that infrastructure? What I've seen has been actually quite poor. Who's actually doing the work? It's not really the African labor, and certainly not in the more skilled functions. And they bring in Chinese workers. You only have to go to a job site to see the signs in Chinese. I don't think that's targeting an African labor pool. And what is the cost of those projects? No one really knows, because they're almost always bound by confidentiality clauses. And so what is it that that project has to hide? Now, the United States doesn't give loans for the most part. We give grants, whether it's the Millennium Challenge Corporation or USAID. Almost 100% of our assistance goes in the form of grants. We're investing in the success of partner countries. And we try to be as transparent as possible. And so you want to know what United States assistance is providing in the Gambia or Senegal or anywhere in the region? Look it up, foreignassistance.gov. It's there, you can find it. We've got nothing to hide. And again, that transparency is what we think will raise the sea level for everybody, so that everyone can benefit, particularly African labor and African economies.
Some people might argue, though, that when we look at the Chinese model, as we can call it that, we're seeing success, at least outwardly, and what they're spending in Africa when it comes to infrastructure, it's making a huge difference. That is what they are judging. Because when it comes to the values bit, you realize that even those who preach it for convenience, they ignore them. that sort of thing. So once you are operating in this sort of political ecology, then it becomes very difficult. We are seeing the success of the Chinese model. This is how it is interpreted. And it could possibly sooner or later even infect the way we do politics.
Right.
It could be very interesting in the longer term, perhaps.
No, indeed. And I think the question is, I'm not sure you see the value proposition. We see what's tangibly on the ground. There wasn't a road there, and now there is a road. Now, 2.5 years later, we see that road crumbling. We don't see what the cost of that road is, and we don't see what the opportunity cost. So we don't know what were the other bids that were put in to provide that road, and what would be the quality, and what is the cost. So yes, you talk about Chinese investment across the continent, and there's a lot of it. Overwhelmingly, it is debt that the African people, not just the governments, the people, the taxpayers, are going to have to pay over a lifetime. And what are the terms of that debt? Well, again, no one knows, because it's not transparently made public.
So what would you say? I think you had sort of begun actually itemizing some of them. What would you say is the comparative advantage of the US?
So again, I think there's the comparative advantage is focusing on transparency, quality, and partnership with not only African partners, but with our partners around the world. We don't come in and say what you need to do. We come in and say, what do you want to do together? We invest after doing research and through partnership. The MCC is a fantastic model. We come in and jointly with a government, and we're doing it here in the Gambia right now. We hope to enter into force with a threshold program very soon. When we have compacts under MCC, we look at what are the sectors that are providing a binding constraint on economic growth. And we have a discussion with civil society, with government, with the media, with the people, to understand what are the needs and agree on a solution. And then we're transparent in the execution. We hire and train local labor to the extent possible. And the same in business. It's not coming to exploit or to extract. It's coming with a value proposition that is in partnership that helps the American people, helps the Gambian people, or the people in whatever country may be in.
Yes, do you see sort of increased trade between our two countries? It's been going down, and particularly if we put it in the context of now we've got after the African Continental Free Trade Area, one wonders what opportunities have come up because of this new trading zone, perhaps the largest apart from the WTO per number of countries.
Yeah, well, and I think that really remains to be seen. I think the free trade agreement zone is really just getting started. We're eager to, from the United States, to sign a MOU with the Secretariat of the AF Continental Free Trade Agreement area in order to find ways that we can work together to expand that trade. But again, we don't have a model that forces businesses to come and invest or to trade. We do have a model, though, that works with African partners to identify opportunities. And we need to do a better job in making sure that opportunities that are out there become known to the American private sector. Because I think right now there's a very vague sense of Africa, there's a lot of corruption, there's challenges, I'm not gonna go explore that. At the same time, I look at Africa and I see massive opportunity. I see a dynamic, vibrant youth population. I see, both the labor force, the creativity, and the consumer base that can really contribute, abundantly to American trade and to values Americans and that benefits Africans. Fantastic.
That's it, but that's the thing, isn't it? Seeing Africa more as a problem, there appears not much respect. We all remember Trump's charming description of being a shithole. So there appears to be that lack of respect from the US to everybody else, especially in Africa. We are at the butt end of everybody's disrespect. Surely one has to work on this perception. It makes a huge difference, and some would say it's not simply a perception, it's a reality.
I think perceptions are a challenge, and there are ample examples. At the same time, we have a massive African diaspora population that is focused on how can we expand our ties to this continent. And I think if you look at the history of the private sector worldwide, they go where the money is and where there's opportunity. And so in those parts of the continent where there is opportunity, American investors are present. Now, I think what we need to do, and one of the challenges that's both for people like me, American diplomats, but frankly, for African leaders, is to really highlight the opportunities and the successes. It's unfortunate that so few Americans know about the bright, shining stars on the continent. I look at Cabo Verde. I look at the dynamic economy in Cote d'Ivoire. I look at the new opportunities that are emerging with a reform-oriented government in Zambia. I look at a bright, shining opportunity here in the Gambia where the people are really demanding change. Now, the key, though, is not just for the reforms to be one-off. I think the key is to identify a systematic plan to improve the business enabling environment. And that, combined with the trade missions, the championing and the public relations, will bring investors.
Yes, and just as you were talking there, it just occurred to me that I wonder whether bringing in the diaspora, as you mentioned, we have a huge diaspora in the US, whether there's a strategy to integrate, as it were, the diaspora so that it can have more impact, as it were, over here, and you would be facilitating it, as it were. Is there such a thing, I wonder?
I would argue that that's exactly the kind of thing that we should be doing. And actually, Ambassador Comer and I were just talking about that very issue this morning. But it's not just us. This is a two-way relationship. This isn't what is the United States relationship with Gambia? This is the Gambia and the United States mutual relationship. And I was horribly saddened by the untimely death of Ambassador Fadera, and I'm eager for the Gambia to appoint a new ambassador to the United States, because that's also the role of your representation in the United States and around the world, to tap into that diaspora and get them vested in returning in contributing to this relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this recent initiative, this Build Back Better sort of world initiative. Some are calling it your America's equivalent of the Rolton Beltway project. What is this about? How do we benefit? How can Gambia benefit? What is this about?
It's still being fully fleshed out. It's a good concept. We've heard loud and clear from...
Or rather, can we just hold that thought, go for a short break? We'll be right back.
Have you been looking for the perfect indoor router with long-range Wi-Fi coverage and faster internet speed connecting all your smart devices? Well, we present to you the QCell Indoor Router, a router that has all you need and much more. For just $4,750, you can get 4G plus internet speed, wide coverage, and connect up to 15 devices. And that's not all. The indoor router can be used for both office and home needs. So, enhance your internet experience with our indoor router. For more info, call our customer care on 111. QCell, Senior Plus. We innovate, others follow. As the fastest growing GSM company in the Gambia, QCell has the widest 4G plus coverage in the country, 3 times faster internet speed than our competitors. So switch now and dial *335# and enjoy what true 4G feels like. QCell, the Gambia's trusted network.
Hello, welcome back to the Viewpoint. I am Momodu Mboj. Today we have the U.S. Ambassador's residence in Fajara, and I've got a special guest here from the senior cadre of American foreign policy, Mr. Michael Gonzalez. That's it. Just before we went on the break, we were talking about this new initiative, Build Back Better initiative, and what is it about? How does the Gambia benefit, I suppose?
And so we're still working out the details, but ultimately we've heard loud and clear a message not only from our African partners, but from partners in developing countries around the world, that some of the binding constraints on economic growth, the availability of capital, and the need for fundamental enabling infrastructure that allows for the economy to yield its full potential. Whether it's roads or ports or electricity. And so the United States will soon look to unveil a plan that will be able to be responsive to that. But not just responsive to the fundamental infrastructure needs of the economy of the past, the pre-COVID economy, but frankly, the economy that's going to drive economic growth and well-being well into the 21st and towards the 22nd century. Things that include women and all elements of society fully in economic opportunity. Things that contribute towards a green economy or a blue economy, where there's so much potential, where we need to be investing now to take advantage, but also to take advantage sustainably. So, watch this space, but we're hoping to unveil a plan soon.
That's exactly it. You do have people often say that really our priorities right now obviously would be infrastructure, digitization, health, energy, that sort of thing. But the complaint is that when some of these donor agencies, including countries as well, they have their sort of agenda, be it gender equality, they have to tick the boxes, and then all donors will be channeled through that. They tell you actually where you should spend, instead of genuinely engaging with our fundamental issues. Need to industrialize, need to do all sorts of things. But you never see really a concerted, impactful intervention there. All you get is just high-sounding pronouncements?
I'm not sure I fully agree with that. But ultimately, just because a donor has something on offer doesn't mean a country has to accept it. It really, truly should be a dialogue. And I'm really proud of the type of assistance that the United States provides, whether through USAID, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, or the Development Finance Corporation, because we have a broad variety of tools. But let's be clear, when it's aid, it is coming from American taxpayers that should serve the interests or the values of the American people. I am thrilled that I have a career focused on Africa, and I've yet to serve an environment where I have thought that we are pursuing American interests that have come at the cost of African interests. And then quite the opposite. I've seen tremendous examples of mutually beneficial support. And so if what is needed are roads, well, the American government's not in the business of building roads, but the American private sector may be. So let's talk about your procurement process and transparency in procurement. And we will do everything possible to sensitize American businesses to this opportunity. And that might provide the solution. But it may be that what you need is healthcare, in which case we're some of the best in the world in providing health systems improvements that really deliver for the people. And so you also have a variety of partners. And so I think it's who is guiding the process really matters too.
Absolutely, because there is an argument that before we can really make any strides, for instance, in gender equality and rights and the rest of it, perhaps with a successful economy, get that right, improved education, then in the longer term, because this is where you have to deal with attitudes. That will take a longer time. We all know that. Here, any government who wants to defend, and a candidate who wants to defend certain rights, you'll probably lose at the polls. You have this democratic issue as well. So this is the key, that once we've got the infrastructure, the economy right, where we need more help, then others will follow. There appears to be some people are just focusing on gender rights and all of these things, where according to people out there, they really do not see it as a priority. It's extraordinary how people's perceptions and what experts say.
Yeah, you know, people's perceptions are really valid and often are a big constraint. What I heard you say is, you know, if we really develop our economy by only including half of the population, then we'll succeed. And to me, I can't imagine how your economy can achieve its full potential when you leave out half of the population. You know, that's like saying, well, as soon as we lay these copper wires so we have landlines, then we can transform up to cellular systems. Well, no, I'm sorry, the world's already at cellular. And if you're going landline, then you're going to miss the opportunities. And if you're excluding half of your population, you're going to miss the benefit of the contributions that they will provide to your society and to your economy.
That's it. So you've been within the Africa Bureau Chief for a long time. When you look around, what would you prioritize? Maybe top 3 priorities that these governments must change A, B, C before things begin to fall in place. Yeah. One wonders.
My perspective from 20-something years as an American diplomat in Africa, I have 2 priorities. The first one, fighting corruption. And the second one, a business-enabling environment. Corruption sucks away at the creativity. It sucks away at the benefit to all of the people. It excludes the marginalized, the rural populations, those who are not politically connected from the benefits of what the state should be providing, and from opportunities for the economy to achieve its full potential. And the business enabling environment, again, is not attracting the full competition of businesses from around the world. And therefore, you'll have very few options, and then you're dependent on who's willing to come. I think Africa needs to take ownership and take leadership and create the environment so that you're in the driver's seat, so that you can choose among a broad variety of options, not just the 1 or 2 that come your way.
Yes, and here I will take it fighting corruption as what happened with the case of the former President Jammeh. You took his Potomac mansion, sold it, so the money would come. Would that be also a part of the strategy? Not simply what we do, But again, when you have some of these scoundrels who make up with all of these millions, then one would return. Would that be part of the...
Absolutely. I think the fight against corruption needs to be multi-pronged. Certainly seizing assets that are from ill-gotten gains and returning them to benefit the people is fundamental. And we've got great examples of doing that, several $100 million of seized assets from the Sani Abacha era in Nigeria that have now gone back to benefit the Nigerian people. I think it is critical here in a place like, is it the National Audit Authority is playing a really vital role in doing audits and pursuing where there's been malfeasance and now taking that next step towards prosecution. So not only identifying cases where it happens, prosecuting to cause a chilling effect and increase the cost of those who are engaged in corruption, but also focusing on prevention. Things like asset disclosures and beneficial ownership disclosures so that there is much more clarity in who is benefiting from transactions and transparency in procurement. Government procurement ends up spending a huge amount of money that goes to people's pockets and not to people's benefit.
Yes, maybe it's unfair to ask this. I wonder whether that Potomac money, have we got it? Have we received it? Or the process is still on?
I'm actually not very close to this case. My understanding is that the property was only recently seized, and so I think there's still the
process is going on.
The sale, etc.
Fantastic. We're coming towards the end. I wonder what promises do you see in Gambia? I know it's only 2 days, but what prospects, what promises do you see for us? Perhaps even with Africa generally.
The Gambia makes me smile because, again, it's the people have said enough. The people have said, we want something better, we want change, and the people are contributing to the solution. They're not just waiting for the government to impose the solution, but I've seen a dynamism in civil society, in the media, in looking at, and in Parliament, in looking at and holding the government accountable, in engaging in dialogue with the government that welcomes that kind of dialogue. But ultimately, again, I think the longer-term success of this process is going to be fundamental reforms, constitutional reform, reform of key legislation, reforms of the business enabling environment so that the private sector can come in and create those jobs. I think the future is bright for this place.
Absolutely. And just finally, I understand that you've won what is called an award for constructive dissent.
Yes.
Fascinating title. What was that all about, and how can you teach me how to do it?
So the American Foreign Service Union has an award that we grant to members of our own union, diplomats, for disagreeing with policy in a constructive way within the system. Because diplomacy and frankly policy is an art and not a science. And ultimately, we talk a lot about diversity, and sometimes it's people who look differently. They contribute a lot because where you sit depends on where you came from. And hearing different people's perspectives and being able to openly discuss those and consider those makes for better decision making. And sometimes we also have environments where people in power don't want to hear other people's opinions. And I was once in an experience in that in my career, and I felt that we were pursuing something that was inappropriate and incorrect and didn't serve our interests. And I raised it rather vocally within my system with senior-most leaders. And ultimately, the team that I supervised saw and appreciated my work, and they nominated me for this award for standing up for the values of America and pursuing our interests.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michael Gonzalez. That's going to be my mantra. It will be a mantra for a while.
Thank you so much, sir.
Cheers.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much, viewers. Until next time, I'm Mudumbush. Goodbye.